Hey guys, I'm Si, and welcome to Ace Podcast Nation. This is series 2 of our revamped and new look mental health in sports series. This time around, the series is focusing specifically on footballers, current and ex-footballers coming on the show, talking to me and Jacob about their difficulties with mental health, addiction, similar subjects. So far we've spoken to Keith Gillespie. He talked in detail about his issues with gambling. We talked to David Cottrell about his battle with depression and drinking and how it affected his life. We also spoke to current Warsaw captain James Clark about his issues with PTSD following anaphylactic shock. I'm really glad that I pronounced anaphylactic correctly because I always mess it up. We also spoke to host of the Andy Campbell Show, Mr. Andy Campbell, about his battle, which came after football when he's had an enforced retirement because of injuries, and he struggled a bit, and he was very open about that. Yesterday, as we record this, we spoke to ex-Manchester United winger. My name's gone completely blank, so I'm going to have to edit. Luke Chadwick, yeah, I'm going to have to edit that. Luke Chadwick, and we talked a lot about mental health generally, but also basically his experiences with bullying. Is what I would call it. It was obscene, and even though it was 20 years ago, like you could tell by the way he discussed it how much it affected him. And he obviously speaks a lot about mental health now and trying to help young players with the work he does with his academy. Check out the previous episodes, and we've extended the series now, so it's going to be at least 10 episodes with current and ex-footballers. Hopefully, someone from the PFA will join us at some point as well. Fingers crossed with that, but we are trying. And here at Ace Podcast Nation, we've home to many great shows and series featuring exclusive interviews, top guests, expert analysts, and more on various subjects. So give youtube.com/Ace Podcast Nation a subscribe, click the bell, and you'll get notified every time we go live or release a video or an interview. And of course, you can get audio versions of everything at the usual podcast and radio platforms. Links to everything will be in the description, as well as some helpful links surrounding mental health and stuff like that. But with no further ado, joining me for each episode is someone who's a regular on the channel now. He's been on loads of times, every episode for this series, and I'm very happy to welcome back my co-host, mental health support worker Jacob, back onto the channel, show, everything. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, good. Loving it. I was obviously we recorded one yesterday. I was buzzing because we haven't done it in a couple of weeks. Lockdown's been a bit rubbish. A few of my colleagues I work with listened to it. So it was a nice thing to come in the morning, have our little coffee, chat about the chat. So I was buzzing for today. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, the feedback generally to all the shows has been really good, and I keep saying I'm going to send you some of the messages, and I keep forgetting, but I will remember eventually. But it's been really good. It's been really nice, and that is really why we decided to extend the series, because initially it was just going to be 5 episodes, record them all close together, and then leave it probably till after Christmas, and then come back to it maybe next year. But because of the reaction and because of the current circumstances in the world, with lockdowns everywhere in the UK all the time, COVID, everyone's struggling. Everyone's having days where it's hard. Life is hard. And I include myself in that. Some days I wake up and I feel good and motivated and I really want to get going. And then I could wake up the next day and I just don't want to get out of bed. But, with 3 kids, I don't have a choice. But there we go. But it's a difficult time. But our guest for today is former England under-21 international, Ex Sunderland, Cardiff City, and Hartlepool United defender, among many other clubs. I'm very pleased to welcome Darren Williams to the show. Welcome, Darren. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Obviously, delighted to be on the show. Obviously, I've seen some of the podcasts that have gone out, and they've been really interesting, and at times, obviously, funny, and other times, obviously, you see the serious side of things as well.
Yeah.
And how that side can affect people.
Yeah, thank you. And also it's I find these shows particularly interesting. Like you say, sometimes they can be, you can have a bit of a giggle and it could be quite funny. And then other times they've been quite almost emotional, quite, hearing people's story, because everyone's story is different. Everyone's sort of battle with mental health is different. And the thing is, like Jacob, I'd say most people now, if they're honest, at some point in their life, particularly if if you're sort of 25 and upwards, I think most people have had some sort of period where they've been struggling with some kind of mental health issue, whether it's depression or just having a tough time.
Yeah, I know they say statistics 1 in 4, but I think it's a lot more than that. I think as a sort of generation, I suppose the younger generation are just better at sort of maybe understanding it, and there's more knowledge out there. I think if you ask, one of my grandparents, she's 91. She had depression for the first time at 90 years old, and she was like, "What is this?"
Yeah,
And I was trying to explain it to it, like it's really common. Loads of people are on antidepressants, and she really, she was amazing. She really struggled, and it was like, but it's amazing to get that far and not have a mental health difficulty. But it shows how, at 90 years old, you can still struggle with depression.
Totally.
Yeah, so I think we're better. We always say we're better at talking about it now, but I just think there's more sort of education and more sort of awareness about it. And I think there's more confidence in people to come out and share their experience. I think if I look what I was like maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't tell my colleagues that I had ADHD and I worked in a mental health team.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel confident. I didn't feel that it would be respected. Where now I'm pretty open about most things. I'm probably too open in some ways, but I think that's the power of, you can see, things have changed.
I think like you're saying there, the 1 in 4, I think it's probably lower than that. I think the older generation, like you say, they're 90-year-old, first time I obviously had this, but I think more now. I think because of obviously how things are now, there's more. It's things are a lot more publicized. There's a lot more help out there now. Obviously, like you say, it is more of an educational point of view that's starting to creep in, to workplaces, to schools, etc. And I think people are becoming more and more aware of it. So, which I think is helping people come out and speak a bit more about it as well. Because I think, going back years ago, you were maybe a bit embarrassed to come out and speak about things like that, because you felt like you were the man and you should not speak about this. This shouldn't affect men. This is like, and I think we're starting to turn that tide now, and I think people are starting to come out, because at the end of the day, as we personally myself as well, if you don't speak about it, you just bottle it up, and it just gets worse and worse.
Yeah, funny enough, in the last week or so, a young guy has reached out to me on my Twitter DMs. I think he's only like early 20s, and like he's having a tough time about it. He'd seen one of the shows, and obviously I'm not going to name him and talk about his situation, but he's just having like a tough time, and he kind of reached out, and we're just chatting, and like the difference. So I was 39 yesterday, so like I've got about at least 15 to 18 years on him in terms of age, and the difference in how he kind of looks at mental health, he's just a bit more educated about it. And like when I was a teenager, and I had depression as a teenager. Like my father died when I was 16. I had some issues with smoking things I shouldn't, drinking, stuff like that, which made it worse. I had a younger brother who I had to look after, and I sort of kind of bottled everything up, and I didn't deal with it until probably about 3 years ago properly. But I really noticed the difference in just the education in terms of how he viewed it. Like he very much understood that he was having a tough time and why, and he wanted to talk to someone about it, which I was happy to do. Whereas I think back to when I was probably having similar issues, when I was similar age or maybe a bit younger, and I was encouraged to not speak about it by maybe some elements of my kind of family or close friends, because you just said it then, Darren, you're a man. Don't talk about you don't talk about your emotions, you don't talk about your feelings, you don't talk about being upset. And like I was a 16-year-old who was already had a lot of pent up stuff going on, as teenagers do. Then my dad died. I had the brother who was like 11, 12, and a mum who's suddenly on her own looking after 2 boys. I felt very responsible to kind of help them, which had a massive knock-on effect. And I think talking about mental health is massive. And for me personally, talking about stuff is the only way I can process it. If I try and process stuff in my head, that's when things start to go badly.
Yeah.
So I think but when we talked about it yesterday, Jacob, with Luke about bottling up stuff, like he didn't really tell anyone that he was bothered by the stuff on They Think It's All Over and the stuff in the media. So he was carrying that around with himself. And I think the way he dealt with that was really admirable because that could have gone. I feel like that could have gone really bad. Like could have gone on wrong.
He was lucky. He was lucky. He sounds awful saying he's lucky, but I think to hold on to that much
raw emotion,
shame
isn't
and
it?
stuff like that for 20 years, it's very rare. It will come out some way. So
yeah.
And when he was talking, I said that most people would have probably ended things or gone off different tangents.
Drinking,
yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about, kind of before we get on to you personally, Darren, is we saw Greg Clark of the FA has resigned, sacked, I don't know, left by mutual consent.
Been booted out the door.
Yeah, he used a term which back when I was a kid, you'd have heard that term, your grandparents, your parents, everybody would have used that term. In this day and age, people know better. And like I say, we talked about bullying on last week's show. And I feel like it's a really stupid, ignorant term to use. And then for someone in such a high position in the FA to be using that term so like openly. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, he was on like a public interview as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. So just before this, because I knew the story, but I thought I'll do a bit of research, watched what he said. So it was like a public forum. I think there were some MPs there. And I think the headline is that he said coloured people instead of people of coloured. But what is sort of being missed is the other stuff he said. So he said homosexuality is a life choice, which obviously that is not the belief of myself and most of the rest of the public. And he also said female footballers don't like the ball being kicked at them hard. So some sexist stuff there. So like
I didn't know about that stuff.
Yeah, so he said that. And so that was all in an hour. He said that. So I was like,
in a public forum.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And it's not the first, I think, because I watched one interview, I can't remember who was doing it, and she was like, he's an older man, should he have been sacked for this? Are we saying now we can't get things wrong? And I said, and the person she was saying was giving a good argument. I hate, and she said, "What if you said that as an accident because he's apologized straight away? Should you be sacked?" And I think the difference is Joe Bloggs off the street, who's a 60-year-old man who maybe, did used to use that term, who's maybe not done education. That is very different to a man of huge responsibility at £190,000 a year who is paid to know what he is paid and trained to know what to say. And also, he can't have those views. This, for me, the race stuff is atrocious, but the homosexuality stuff and the sexist stuff just shows how normal it is for him that he thinks that's normal. And
he doesn't think that's a big deal.
For me, that the stuff about women's football just it looks about 10, 15 years old. And there's a reason why there's no openly gay professional footballers in England. And it's for comments like that.
I just looked at his apology. Sorry to interrupt you, Jacob. I just looked at his apology. He doesn't he doesn't mention the sexism or the homophobia.
Yeah. So the guy who brought it
says
up,
about the race.
So I think it was
comments.
an MP, a Labour MP. So he says it, and then the MP asks him basically, in your last comment, you said coloured player. Do you wish to apologise for that? So he apologised for that comment, but then I think someone went through the transcript and gone, "Oh, you said that and that as well."
I think for somebody in his position, you obviously should be educated, extremely well, to be in that position. I think it's wrong in so many levels, and I think you're out there and you should be an example, and you should be coming across as the right example and not the wrong example. And everything you look at there, anybody watching that or anybody reading that now, as a younger person, is going to think that's okay, and that's normality, but it isn't. Times have changed and things have changed, and unfortunately, he doesn't seem to have changed with the times.
Yeah, and I think he doesn't represent, for me as someone involved in grassroots football, if I look at him, he doesn't represent any of my players. He doesn't represent the diversity of the players I work with. And also sort of in your role, in your academy, all these players coming from different places around the world. You've got a really multicultural academy. You've got this old white guy who's completely out of touch with how football is in the modern game.
100%, and like I said, that we're obviously with the Eye to Eye International Academy that I work for. Basically, we have all nationalities, from all around the world and all different cultures, and even at times when the lads are talking amongst themselves, and we'll hear a word that shouldn't be used, and definitely shouldn't be used in the UK, but unfortunately for them guys, it's a normality back in where they live. But we have to turn around to them and say, you can't use that type of language here. It's not right. And they're younger guys, and they take it on board, and they actually accept that, and then they change themselves, and obviously we don't want to change people, but what we to say that is not right, and you can't use that. I know it's probably acceptable from where you come from, and obviously amongst your friends, but you can't just use that randomly whenever you want.
No, it's about education as well in that situation, isn't it? It's and like you say, you're able to explain that it's not acceptable and why it's not acceptable.
And also,
I was just going to say, Jacob, right? And I'd be interested to hear your view, with your work with mental health and footballers. I think as football fans, football coaches, football clubs, as a football community, from professional to grassroots, we all understand that there is gay footballers. We know there is, just by the statistically there's going to be gay footballers. We want those gay footballers to feel comfortable to be able to come out publicly when they're ready and live their life as they choose for their own mental health and for their own well-being. And if I'm a gay footballer and I'm seeing comments like that, that is exactly why we haven't got these guys and these women coming out publicly, because you've got these old white guys in charge making decisions on anti-racism campaigns and encouraging, whether it's anti-racism or encouraging people to be more accepting, football fans to not use homophobic chants, and all the different campaigns we've had over the years on these various issues. This guy would have been involved in planning and installing these campaigns around the country and the football clubs. And the lastly thing I wanted to say as well on top of that then is he will have had media training. He will have had some sort of mental health education training through his job, as most people do in some shape or form, or a well-being course, something like that. So the fact that he's saying that stuff so comfortably and so openly, I just think that shows that it's not a slip of the tongue. It's it's a view which he holds on all three subjects, and he feels comfortable saying it, and that's worrying to me. But Jacob, I'd be interested in what your views are on some of the stuff I said, particularly like about the homosexual players, because I just think I worry about those guys having to, basically hide who they are for fear of the reaction from people like that.
Yeah, I think it's, we know that there's players out there. Just statistically, it's going to happen. And I think for me, it's just an odd one. It's such a disgrace that it's a failing of the FA that a player does not feel comfortable. And I know, is it Gareth Williams, the Welsh rugby?
Is it Gareth? I don't know. It's Gareth. Gareth Thomas.
Yeah,
sorry.
Gareth Thomas. His documentary about it, and he met with the FA at the time, spoke to them, and their thoughts at the time were just out of touch. Like the stuff they were saying then was just like not, I know I've heard of players that have been ready to come out and then sort of been encouraged not to come out. So I just think that's something. If you look at the women's game, that is something. I've worked with a few women footballers. They're like 10 years ahead of like times with sort of homosexuality. It's not a thing. It's really common, and it's not made into a thing. And and the way I've started following women's football a lot more this season, and like following the Chelsea's and stuff like that. And some of the ways they do football is just so different. It's more like watching grassroots football, as in the fans are completely different. They're not at the players in a disrespectful way, but the love for football is just there. Like in grassroots football, it's all about supporting it, and it's competitive. It's really competitive, but it's also about welcoming if there's a struggle, we're going to welcome you. And there's bits, I think in lower football you get it, but I just think there's a reason that a player hasn't come out in England, and that's probably because they don't feel they're going to get supported by the FA, the PFA, and their club.
Do you also think? Sorry, Darren. I was going to just put this question to you, mate. Actually, do you think that maybe another reason why these players might not be coming out is because they feel like the FA or the PFA or whoever is going to almost parade them around as this kind of it's the first footballer to come out, and like Jacob just said there, in the women's game, it's much more, it's not a big thing. And I think, that's the way it should be. And I think
totally. I think
could be a worry.
I think the women have got it absolutely spot on. It's the women's it's a relaxed environment, and it is what it is kind of in the ladies' game, and it should be like that in the male side of things as well. I honestly don't. It doesn't change anybody as a person. It doesn't change anybody as a footballer. They're still the same person. They're still the same footballer. It shouldn't. They shouldn't have to hold something in for so long, worrying about the fact that what's the teammates going to think, what's the FA going to think, how is this going to be portrayed. Am I going to be, slapped over the papers, week in, week out because I've come out and said something, that I need to say it and that they want to say it, and it's heartbreaking. I think that there is guys in the game that are going through that, and it must be. They must get up every day, and it must be the first thing on the mind. They must be thinking, because they're desperate, they just want to kind of come out and just be honest with everybody. And it's disappointing that we're not at a stage now in the modern day game that where individuals can do that, can step out and just be honest. Because how much better would it all be? I wouldn't look at anybody, if it was my teammate any differently. They would still be the same person. They would still be the same teammate. Still be the same best friend. Nothing would change. But I think we're just so behind in the game at this moment in time. We need to look at the ladies' game and think, where are we going wrong?
Yeah, spot on. The I was looking at some of the comments on Twitter earlier on to the reaction to it and stuff, and there was one comment which kind of really caught my eye. And he was just off this guy called Mohammed Islam on Twitter. He just said, Greg Clark may have resigned, but he'll be replaced by someone from the FA conveyor belt with the same, basically the same views, same attitudes, the same sort of just blasé attitude to whether it's mental health or anti-racism
I think in some ways it's going to be completely different.
I'd like to think so.
I think this is an opportunity that the FA have, and I think the outcry of the people, players, fans, I think they know if in some ways it could go the opposite way. I think they could just go, right, let's make an appointment that's going to keep the people happy. And they haven't really thought. I hope that they really look into the recruitment and hire someone who's the best for the job, but also is, has all that training, but also a lived experience of those sort of themes. But I think it would be a serious fuck up if they did. I think if they appointed, I think it would look as a PR. It would go down like a lead balloon. And I think there's people who've probably had, who've wanted an opportunity to, bang the FA for their wrongdoings over the last sort of 10 years. So I think all the Wolves are ready, and in some ways they've deserved it. Some of the things they've done over the years have been shocking. So I think the next sort of 6 months is going to be really big if it's, as a business, they want to change and sort of change the way they run their business, or if they want to go with the old. But I honestly believe that if they appoint someone who's a carbon copy of him, I think it will go down like a lead balloon.
Yeah, and one thing I'd say is the PFA. I've been quite critical of the PFA on various shows with regards to mental health and whether they're doing enough. But they actually, if you go on their staff sort of list on the PFA of their executives and people that, like, it's full of very, very talented, multicultural, multi-gender people who have done great jobs. And a lot of them have been involved in football in some way, shape or form. And I think I would like to see some of those people maybe transition over to the FA and try and change, because let's face it, as good as for instance, the anti-racism, the kick it out campaigns and all these things, they're good. Obviously, we want that, but have they really changed attitudes? And can you change attitudes if the people at the very top of the FA or the Premier League or whoever it may be, FIFA, if they're not on board in terms of if their personal views don't line up with the campaigns that they're pushing around the world, ultimately I think it's set up to fail. So I would like to see a reform of who's making those decisions, who's planning those, who's implementing those campaigns. But that's just my opinion, obviously. Okay, so we'll move away from Greg Clark for now. So over the course of the previous shows, we've talked about academies and particularly where young players are kind of in the academies from young ages, 7, 8, all the way up to 16. And then, obviously we all know the statistics in terms of how many people make it to be a professional footballer. So a lot of those kids get dropped and, their whole world falls apart when they don't get a professional contract. Now, Darren, you work, within academies now. How do you deal with that side of things and sort of mental health and well-being, whether it's from a coach's point of view or, just helping those young players?
Yeah. I think from our point of view, obviously with the I2I International Academy that I work for, and basically, this year we've kind of stepped up a little bit, so we've employed a mental health officer. So the guys have got contacts, immediately. If anything, the guys have obviously got immediate contacts with ourselves as coaches, and obviously, we've had situations that we've had to deal with at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, as coaches, which is part. Well, I mean, we see it as a company as part and parcel of obviously, the well-being of the guys and taking care of these guys, because they're from all over the world. Their parents are back in the States, or wherever they're from. So they're not just on hand to speak to the parents. So we make it our right to be there and obviously take care of these guys and kind of treat them as our own children, really, as we would, and look after them, make sure that they're fine. From obviously a football point of view, not all will go professional, which we explain this from the outset. Not all will go professional, not all will go semi-professional, but you're doing a degree also, so you're doing the educational side of things as well. So we've got a route for that. So what we do is we try and plan a route for each individual. Some guys are more academic than they are obviously from the sports side of things. Some guys are desperate to become a professional footballer, which I feel they need to be explained to as this is a very, very rare chance that you will become a professional footballer. We've all been through it. I've been through it. You've got that very slim chance of making it. Making a career out of it, but there is also a semi-pro option. And what we do is we look for avenues, even if it's not in the UK. We look for avenues back where they live. In the States. So we'll try and find avenues back to clubs, pro clubs, semi-pro clubs. If they're doing a sports degree or a sports management degree, so then we'll look for job opportunities in and around obviously their area where they live back home, or if they wanted to stay in the UK, then obviously we'll look for opportunities over here for them. But we try to go into depth and explain as much as we can, and obviously be there for the guys, because you know how disappointing it is when you get knocked back. You know, I was knocked back as a young player, you know, two or three times, you know, and it hits you really hard, and you think, you know, that's the end of the road. It's not the end of the road, but unless somebody actually explains that to you and actually takes the time to sit down with you and say, look, this is not the end of the road. This is a little stumbling block. You know, you can move on. You can, you know, we've seen it happen with players. Look at James Vardy. You know, a late bloomer came through. You know, and now obviously, you know, he's playing the heights of the Premier League, top scorer. You know, playing for England. You know, these opportunities can happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to happen. You know, so what can we do on the other side of things in case that doesn't happen? So can we get you an educational side where we can then go and find you a job, and then you could still play semi-pro level? You know, and there's loads of different opportunities and things, but I don't think a lot of people take the time to sit down with these guys and explain it, because I don't think a lot of these guys understand how it affects these lads. You know, the day in, day out of the banter in the dressing room. You know, they're having a laugh on the training ground. You know, and these guys have maybe gone through all the younger, you know, the younger stages, the 8s, the 9s, the 10s. You know, they're getting to 16, 17, 18, and they may get released, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, what do I do now? You know, so I think from our point of view, we try and put something in place in case that doesn't happen for these guys.
That's really refreshing to hear. I gotta be honest, because like I've talked about my own experience with my kids, and how when I spoke to a lady, she's a sports psychiatrist, and like her job is basically to help, you know, teenagers with when they get dropped or when they don't get off, you know, they don't get offered a professional contract, and preparing for that possibility. And one of the things which stood out from what you said there for me was the education side of it, whereby planning for the occurrence that, look, if it doesn't happen for you, have this to fall back on. And one thing I've encouraged my oldest son to do, who's sort of doing his GCSEs this year, or was supposed to before they got cancelled, is having something to fall back on if football doesn't work out. And like I've spoken to him honestly and said, I'm not sure if it's going to work out for you. You know, he might be a late bloomer and it might work out, but like there's semi-professional football. You can make some good money doing that. You can also just have it do it for fun. He's interested in coaching children, so he wants to do his coaching badges now as night school. And I've had to say, no, let's wait, because you don't want to try and do your GCSEs and do that. But,
of course.
I think coaching, and I think it'd be refreshing to see some really young coaches coming through the systems.
Totally agree. I mean, and again, another side of our program is the fact that these guys have the opportunity to do their level 1 and level 2 coaching badges, you know, which some of our guys then go home in the summer and actually coach back in the States. Because they have a level 1 or a level 2 coaching badge from the FA, you know, in the UK is massive in America, you know, and
of course.
And these again are all just opportunities for these guys to, you know, to go and earn some money. You know, we encourage them to do this, and then when they go home, they can take that slight burden off the parents of having to pay for the university fees and stuff. You know, they can actually contribute themselves, you know, by using some of their own money. You know, and it just gives them a life plan and a bit more of a, you know, I can do this. You know, okay, football doesn't work out. It's not the be all and end all. I've got some coaching badges, or I've got a degree, you know, from the UK, which is highly thought of back in the US. You know, so all these opportunities are there for the guys. But like I say, sometimes, you know, you have to sit down. You know, if it's players in the UK, you know, you've got to sit down with them and explain, you know, this isn't the end of the world. You will have speed bumps. You know, sometimes you may have to drop down in football to non-league to come back in to play professionally again. You know, and these are all the things that happen in life, but unfortunately don't get explained, because some of these young lads will have agents as well. You know, obviously I have connections with Black Diamond Agency, and the way I would look at, you know, as an individual, as a player, you know, I would look after this guy, you know, and I would make sure he understands the pitfalls, you know, the upsides and the downsides. You know, because some of these lads that have lived a really good lifestyle between 16 and 18 on really good money, and then all of a sudden it's taken away from them. You know, but they need to, you know, if they're not educated in that side of things, then, you know, do the agencies and, you know, do the the agent then spend a lot of time with him explaining, this isn't the end of the world, son. We can find you something. We'll get you something. Can they do a little bit more as well?
Oh, 100%. I think I wish that agents, particularly when it involves young players. So, like you mentioned, Black Diamond. I think Black Diamond is absolutely excellent. They're one of the best I've come across. Obviously, Andy and yourself and Martin, who I know from there, but they take it like very personally in terms of wanting to give the players that they have the full package of looking after them and not just finding them a football club. If you remember, Jacob, David Cottrell said when he went to, I forget which club it was, it might be Stoke, I forget, but basically his agent got him the move and then just left him, just said, well, there you go. The club left him, so he was stuck living with his wife because he had married his childhood sweetheart, he had kids, and he was kind of just stuck in this new area, new place, didn't know anyone, only like 18, 19. And it's like that, to me, between the football club and his agent, both of them should be like rallying around him, for example, David Cottrell, but any young player, and making sure they're set up, particularly if you've got like a young family with them. It's like, help them find a house, help them sort their bills out, because if they've lived at home in an academy on good money, they haven't been paying bills.
No.
And I don't know. It's one of those things.
This is the thing. Yeah, this is the thing, and we've got to start educating these young talents coming through, because obviously we've seen the unfortunate side of it. What happens, when they do get rejected, and we don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see. You don't want to see that in any walk of life. Whether it's you're working as a postman or football or whatever you're doing. You don't want to see any of that. And this is what I'm saying. Agents you've got to go that little bit further. You've got to extend yourself. And I think what happens is agencies take on too many players and they just can't cope with it. And once you've got to move, they think, right, okay, that's them for 2 or 3 years. We'll get back in about. We'll get back in about 2 years when they might be changing club again or might need a new contract. And you can't do that. You've got to be there constantly for these guys. And if you want to represent them, then and this was my words, and Martin and Andy will tell you this. If we're representing players, we represent players. We don't just represent them for 1 minute and then forget them about the next. And Martin and Andy were exactly the same opinion. And that's great. And for me, I can work with guys like that. What I can't work with is guys who get somebody contract and then don't speak to them for 3 years. It doesn't work.
And my experience working with before March, I'd never worked with any football agent in my life, and then since March, I had to work with them a lot with some of the stuff we've been doing in my NHS work. And I think people think that the idea of agent, they're like, oh yeah, they're really involved. They're not. I think in the 100 agents we've emailed, I'd say 3 were probably decent. And there was I've got no shame in saying Sean Wright Phillips, his agent, was one of the nicest guys, a guy called Jason, one of the nicest guys I've literally ever worked with. Couldn't have done anything more for us. And I said to Sean, I was like, don't lose this guy. Whatever you do, keep this guy. And it's a sad state of affair when literally there's only 3 out of, and there's a few more that we've worked with that have been all right, but some will just, we've had loads that go, now that this player's not interested. And I said, I'm pretty sure this person would be interested to do this. And it's because they're not, I suppose the way I'm speaking to them, they know they're not going to get paid because it's an NHS player appearance. So the agent's not getting no money, so there's no benefit for them. So they just won't pass it on.
No.
But I love what you were saying about your academy. So I said, it's so refreshing because I think we spoke about this in the last pod. The traditional academies in football it's not a
conveyor belt, isn't it?
It's not a viable business. It's a conveyor belt of using people to try and get. If it's like a lottery, I'm going to put a bit of effort into 20 lads. Fingers crossed, one of them makes it, and that pays for those 20 lads.
Yeah,
but I think, when you're saying it's not just about making it in football, it's about, can they make it a career out of it? If it's football or if it's agency or if it's behind the scenes. And I think that way of business will be I think long term, I think that's how it will change. I hope that academies get that. And I think we spoke about it, I think with Andy, I can't remember which, the club that got in the playoff finals in the championship last season that didn't win. They've changed
no, Fulham and someone on that.
Yeah, it was not Fulham, the other one. Can't remember now. But their academy system, they've completely changed it. And they've basically got the first team and a second team. They don't have all these youth teams and all that. And then there's a real onus on, we're not just having a conveyor belt. And they found it, they're in the playoff final. So it does work.
Of course it does, yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's. I think the academy system needs a bit of a revamp, and I got to say, obviously we talked about the tragic death of Jeremy Whitson recently. We've talked about it on the Andy Campbell show with TalkSport's Lawrence Mora, and we talked about it with Luke Chadwick on the last show. Look, that's a tragic situation, and we don't know the ins and outs of his life and how responsible was him getting dropped by Man City in terms of his mental health and how he was feeling and doing what he did. Look, we don't know that. No. But what I can say is football clubs on the whole, I don't think do enough to support players when they are dropped or their career ends through injury. Even older players, they so often just get, knee injury, finish career, right, throughout. There's no support system. And this is one of the things I have been critical of the PFA with is, are they doing enough to support those players who get, one day they're training, they've got a great career, they're loving life. Next minute, their career's over because they're 28 and they've got a serious knee injury. Yeah. And the clubs drop them do you know what I mean? I don't think. Yeah.
No, totally.
They're not assets, they're human beings, whatever age they are. And
exactly.
I just wish football clubs would do more.
Yeah. I think I'm just touching on that, obviously, last point from myself on that. Just basically, when I was manager of Whitby, and I know it's non-league, but some guys, when I took over, they went up to speed of what I required, obviously, in the squad. We were in a tough situation. We were in a very sticky situation. We had a lot of young lads who, potentially in my squad probably wouldn't play a lot of football. So myself and obviously my assistant at the time, we actually found another team for them to go and play for. Although there'd be dual registration with ourselves, we found them another team to go and play for, and we said, "Look, unfortunately, you ain't going to play at this moment in time for me, but I've found you this club to go and play for. There's an opportunity there for you to go and play, and we will keep an eye on you. We will monitor you." And obviously, if by getting more games, obviously your game improves, you improve as a player, then basically, we've got that dual contract between us where, you can come back to Whitby, and obviously get back in the squad. But I think, can clubs then, find a pathway for them? There's a lot of clubs obviously in and around the country, whether it's Premier League or Championship or whatever, or non-league, surely a guy who's at Man City, that's not the be all and end all. He's got surely opportunities where he can go and play for other teams. Can teams speak a bit more? Can teams pass on players that they are going to release? It can be a bit more communication between the teams, I think, and say, look, we've got this lad. Unfortunately, he's not meeting our standards at this moment in time. However, we feel like he could be, beneficial to you. This helps players. Then it helps players move on and accept that it isn't the end of the world.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And actually, funny enough, very very quickly, just to use my children as another example, is my youngest boy has been with a certain academy. He's been in the development side for the last 2-3 years. His age group just happens to be very, very good within this club. So he's played for the full academy a couple of times. He did really well at a tournament, but he's never quite in the kind of first team squad, if you like. So he's always in the level below. But the coach really rates him. So what the head of the academy setup has done in lockdown is he's come to me and he said, "Look, I think Aidan should be." I said his name. I'm going to have to bleep that out. He said, "I think that your son is good enough to play academy football. It's just unfortunate that he's probably not going to get in the side because we've got so many good players in his position. what I would like to do, if with your permission, is I've contacted another academy in the Welsh League.
Yeah.
We think that he would fit in there well, etc., etc.
Brilliant.
So I know it's only kids football,
Yeah.
but he's gone out of his way to make sure my son has got the best opportunities. You know, he understands that just because he can't get into this academy, that doesn't mean that's it, game over.
Yeah.
You know, and I think if academies can do that, why couldn't? Let's use Man City as an example. Why couldn't Man City say, look, we don't think you're good enough to play for us, and not just with, you know, that young lad Jeremy. I don't like to use him as an example because we don't know the full situation. But any player, you know, Man United, whoever, if they've got an academy player who's been there for 6 years and he gets to 18 and they say, right, we're not going to offer you a pro contract, why can they not go to Salford City and say, look, we've got this boy, he's been with us for 6 years, so he's obviously got something about him.
Yeah.
Would you like to have a look at him, take him on trial, whatever it may be, or a championship club? Or it's not difficult. Do you know what I mean?
No.
In this day and age, it's not difficult to communicate. And I think that is a fantastic way that football clubs could help the human beings that make them so much money.
Totally.
Right. I want to move away from this to finish us off, Darren, slightly.
Yeah.
Obviously, you came out and did some interviews and spoke about mental health and about the need for people to be open and talk about it some more. And I guess I'd like to hear your experience with mental health, your story with it all, and ultimately after that, what led to you doing those interviews and speaking out about it. But just very quickly, for anyone who doesn't know, kind of give us just a quick overview of your sort of career and stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, initially, obviously, as a youngster, when I was first starting out, I was connected with the Middlesbrough Academy at the time. Unfortunately, at the time, there was kind of quite a lot of players basically within the squads, and I felt, my personal needs. I wanted to play. I wanted to obviously get the best out of my career as possible. So I felt I probably would get overlooked at Middlesbrough, even though I was offered a contract there. So I left and went to York. I initially signed obviously for York. Started my career there under Ricky Sprazier, was my youth team manager. Who then, he's a great coach. Who then went on to Sunderland. He then recommended me to Peter Reid. Cut long story short, Peter Reid was in touch. Ended up going to Sunderland, spending, near on 9 years there, fantastic times, obviously ups and downs because it's Sunderland, that's standard. But basically, I loved it. Obviously I managed to break in, the England under 21s and England B team. I then obviously moved on to Cardiff. Sunderland were having obviously issues financially. So I went to Cardiff and, I loved my time at Cardiff. Again, Dave Jones came in and unfortunately wanted to kind of cut my salary in half. But I was kind of in transition because although I was renting in Cardiff, I still had a family back in down in Middlesbrough. So, it didn't really marry up. So I ended up moving on and I went to Hartlepool, Bradford, Dundee. And then I came down the non-league route with Gateshead and Gainsborough. Gainsborough was under Brian Little as a manager, fantastic guy. If anything, probably too nice to be a manager. He was too soft at times, and at times you just wanted to grab him and say, Brian, you've got to be a bit stronger and a bit harder with us. You know what I mean? It's like, but he was a great bloke and a great guy. And then I got the opportunity at Whitby Town. Went and played there. Basically, obviously, ended up getting the managerial job for 4 years and loved it. But then you come out the end of football, professionally, and it's quite it's quite a sudden hit on you. It's kind of like you've been this guy who's been looked at, and and people want your autograph, and people want to speak. I'm not saying that doesn't happen now, but you're in the limelight, and you have the day-to-day banter in the dressing rooms, and you have the away trips with the guys, for games. But like prior to all that, when I was at Sunderland, I lost my dad. So we were due to play Man City on the Tuesday evening, and on the Monday we were in the hotel in Manchester, and I didn't feel particularly great. I just, I don't know what was wrong. It wasn't that I felt ill. Something wasn't right, and unfortunately that evening, like my dad passed away, and I had to leave the hotel and go back home, and and obviously, you know, and I struggled to kind of get back into the game. It took me, you know, weeks and weeks and weeks, and I had Peter Reid and Bobby Saxon on the phone, you know, asking me, you know, can you come into training? Can you come and play? And I said, you know what, I'm not in the right place. I said, I really, I'm not, and I don't want to be an effect on the lads by coming in and not be myself, you know, and just be like, you know, down. And to be fair, obviously, I hit the drink quite hard. And for somebody, because initially I didn't drink, so it was like for somebody who then hit the drink really hard was a massive effect. But I don't, again, like you said earlier on, I don't think I dealt with it, you know, and I didn't deal with it for many, many years. It was kind of, I shouldered a lot of the responsibility, and I took on a lot of the things that needed doing, you know, around the funeral, etc., and obviously, you know, with the family, etc. So I kind of took that role, that lead role, as obviously that my dad would have probably taken, obviously, as the man. And then, as you come out your end of your career, it's, you know, you're losing all that limelight, that day-to-day banter, you know, all that's going, and then, you know, basically you go through the, you know, the divorce side of things, you know, which then hits you massively, you know, then your kids, and, you know, you're having your kids on you know, on the weekends or stuff, and it, you know, and again, you know, I went through a really, really bad patch for months and months and months, and I felt that at times where I probably couldn't see coming out the other end of it. You know, which was quite, you know, it's quite scary, really, you know. And sometimes you sit there on a night and you're on your own, and it's, you know, it's quite daunting because you don't understand how powerful the mind is until obviously things like that hit you. And then obviously I had a little bit of help from the PFA, which was great, but then that help just kind of disappeared, you know, and then you're back into the same situation again, and it, you know, obviously life moves on. Obviously, you know, I'm happily married now. You know, probably happier never in a married situation, but there's always that thing in your mind to think that, you know, have you dealt with everything? Has everything properly? Have you have you cleaned everything up? You know, in your head type of thing. But I think, you know, there's still dark days that you have, and obviously especially with the, you know, the current situation as well. You know, with the pandemic and that, you know, it's really hard and really difficult. And I you know, I just felt at the time, I think, you know, it helped me to speak and to talk to people. And I just feel that, you know, it's a shame that, you know, some people don't kind of get to that situation where they, you know, they feel they can speak to people, because, like we said earlier in the program, you know, you feel like, I'm a man. Do you know what I mean? I don't need to speak to anybody. I should be dealing with this myself. But you're not. You're just a human being. You know, we're all the same. You know, we have our strengths and our weaknesses, but unfortunately, the mind can be such a powerful thing at times.
Oh yes, it's both positively and negatively. As I think the human mind is so complex. You know, there's a few things there which you've mentioned, which I can relate to a lot. One of the things I wanted to touch on is obviously similar to me. It sounds like when you were struggling with various things, feeling not yourself, feeling down, the pressure builds up because you're not dealing with it and you're bottling stuff up. Then you start drinking.
Yeah.
To try and almost you're self-medicating basically, and it makes it worse because every time you stop drinking, you feel 10 times worse. That you're hungover, you feel depressed, and everything which you were stressed about when you started drinking is still there. Like, were you drinking every day, or was it more of like a in between matches? Or
no, it was more like it could be like weekends, you know, where it was like, you know, if obviously if I didn't have a match or anything, it could be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you know, and it's just like, you know, when you think back, it's just like, it's mind-boggling. You think, how did I actually cope, and how did I actually, you know, achieve and manage that? You know, it's like, but it's kind of like from the Friday to the Sunday would be just a blur, you know, it would be like it'd be gone, like, and, you know, and then obviously, you know, especially if, you know, if you're kind of not in work as well, you know, if you've got no work to go to, it's kind of like, well, you know, what do you do? Do you know what I mean? It's just like you sat about, and whereas obviously you then revert back to years ago of obviously when you were playing, you were in the dressing room, but I'll be having a bit of banter now. Do you know what I mean? Have a good laugh on the training ground, or this, that, and the other, and it just all kind of comes careering down on you, and this is what I was saying. You know, with the young lads, I think because I was a little bit older and a bit more experienced, and I kind of had a career. You know, it hit me hard, but I kind of I've got through it and I've dealt with it. But you see these young lads, and unfortunately, majority of them haven't got through it. And the worst scenario happens, and that's what you don't want. And if we can kind of nip that in the bud, or if we can find something that they then have an opportunity after that. There's something after that. It's got to be more. There's got to be something out there that we can create. Something that we can generate. That these guys don't think that's it and that's the end, because it's heartbreaking to see.
Yeah, I mean, Jacob. Sorry, Jacob. I was just going to say one of the reasons we wanted to do this show and this series was because we wanted to show all people, but young people, young as well, is that see these people, different footballers with different stories, different issues they've battled, also given our own personal experiences to show that no matter how alone and down you may feel at your worst, there is a way out, and there is a way to get through it and be happy again. But it doesn't feel like that in your darkest days.
No,
sorry, I interrupted you then, Jacob.
That's right. No, that's brilliant. Darren, it's really impressive. Your account talking about things. How, following sort of the death of your dad and then the drinking, and sort of sounds like you went into sort of depression. How did that affect your family at the time, like the wife and kids and stuff like that?
Yeah, obviously affected us all, in a sense. But I suppose you kind of take yourself away from those obviously who were close to you, type of thing, because you like I say, you try and shoulder it all and take it all in yourself, without having obviously spread it around and infect anybody else in a sense, in a way, and which is why obviously I did struggle to go back into football for a bit, because I just didn't want to kind of be that one who was infecting everybody else, with how I was, or the mindset I was in, type of thing. But then, like you say, you don't really deal with it. Then you just kind of close it in, and it's in there somewhere, and it eventually kind of find its way out. Do you know what I mean? And it's a difficult one. But I think, I think at times, even now, I look back and I think, did I actually deal with that right? I've actually fully dealt with it, and and I suppose not, in a sense, really.
Sorry. I know you said obviously you went to the PFA, got some work, and then it sounds like you then got some more support. What was it that was sort of what led to you going, right, that's it, I need to make a change, and then find that sort of recovery?
Yeah, I think it was just kind of situations that you kind of get yourself in, and obviously how, and some of the things that run through your head, which when you sit back really realistically now and think about it, it's quite scary, in the situations. You're looking at scenarios of maybe he's driving somewhere and doing something, or you're looking at opportunities when you're in the car, type of thing, and they're not places that obviously people want to be in, but unfortunately, that's how the mind works.
Yeah, and I think when you mix in alcohol to those thoughts, it becomes even more dangerous, because the alcohol almost gives you, for the lack of a better term, it gives you more courage to kind of think about those dark thoughts, just from my own personal experience. So whereas if I was sober, I might have those thoughts, but I would think about reasons not to do something stupid. Yeah. Whereas if I was 10 pints in and drinking whiskey or martini was my favorite drink, I'd just drink it from the bottle. It can be you almost become more likely to do something something which is you can't come back from, I think. Did people close to you notice a difference in you, like whether it's friends, family, teammates? Did they see a difference in you day to day?
I think they did on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, and obviously, it's one of those where they say, "Oh, you're all right," or "You're okay," and you kind of be like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like you're more of a put a front on in front of people. So you'd laugh and you joke, and then realistically, you're walking away thinking, I'm not even in that, in the right place to be, to be laughing and joking and this, that, and the other. But again, it's it's putting that front on, and this is what I'm saying. All the aspects we spoke about, tonight on the podcast is people shouldn't feel like that. People should be able to just go, this is how I'm feeling. You know, this is me. This is what I am. You know, this is how I am. Type of thing. And we've got to get to a situation like that. You know, in all walks of life. You know, whatever we need to get out, should be able to come out. You know, without us wondering what is going to be the effects of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say, because there'll probably, I know there'll be people listening that might be at that stage you were sort of back then, where they're drinking, maybe struggling with depression. What advice would you give to sort of someone listening, struggling? What was it that changed? Like for me, with my depression, it was antidepressants, doing exercise, the things that I weren't. I suppose the exercise is something that had stopped, and then I needed it to get back. So, what was the thing that worked for you?
I think for me, basically, it was obviously, you've got to accept yourself that you can't handle everything. You know, you can't shoulder every responsibility. You know, you have to speak out. You know, you have to speak out. You just can't. You've got to cut down your pride. You've got to strip back, and you've just got to say, look, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm thinking. This is, and speak to people. You know, whether it's friends, family. Somebody like yourself, Jacob. You know, in the mental health industry. You know, you've got to speak to people, and then basically, exercise, great. You know, exercise. It's kind of a release. You know, it just gives you that. Don't get me wrong. At the time, you think, I wish I hadn't done that.
Yeah.
You know, 10 mile run. But you feel $1 million after it, and I think those are the key points, and I think first and foremost you need to strip down and think you are able to speak to people, and not feel like you're not able to speak to people because you have a pride or you feel like you should shoulder everything because you can't.
Was there any friends or family like after you did then come out to say, I had struggles? I suppose more recently when you did the article and stuff like that, was there people around you that you weren't aware of that come to you and said, oh, look, I didn't know you had struggled. I've struggled with my own difficulties as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because basically that, they kind of said, oh, you seemed all right. You seemed okay. You were laughing and joking. And I went, yeah, but that's the kind of front you put on, but, and then obviously, somebody else said, you know what, so many years ago, I was in this situation or this happened and that, and the more and more you speak, the more and more you generally see that a lot of people are going through these similar situations. It might not be the same situation, but it's a very similar situation.
And it's really like, I think when people are in that struggle, when you get someone and you have that shared experience, it's so empowering. I think, I say this to somebody, I'd never met an adult with ADHD until I was like 26 or something like that. And then when I met the first one, I was like, look at how I'm not on my own. And then when I was chatting then with the depression, meeting other people, and I interviewed someone recently and said, actually coming out and saying, I've had a mental health difficulty and being very open, they said, now nothing, I'm not afraid to talk about anything now. And it feels like I'm not creeping around being this person. I'm not. I can just be 100% myself. And it's so refreshing and sort of enriching, really.
Yeah.
Darren, you mentioned a couple of times there about like how much talking about it helps. And I think like I bottled stuff up for like 20 years. And when I finally I talked to my wife first, then I saw a doctor and I wrote a letter to my father, which actually I would have never even contemplated doing.
Yeah.
But the psychiatrist or whatever said, look, just trust me, do it.
Yeah.
And she said, I promise you, once you start writing it and you get into like a bit of a flow, you will write pages and pages. And I went back the next week and I think I'd written like 8 pages of just rambling, but just stuff that I had kept to myself. And then I did a podcast with Phil Brown, who does the Beyond the Pitch football podcast. We talked about our battles with addiction and grief and things like this. And I did that hour and 15 minutes, and me and him just talked about all of our emotions, everything we've been through, everything that's happened, our grief, our drinking, addictions and things like that, and how it had affected our loved ones and people around us. And I came off that. I was so emotionally exhausted. It was unreal. It was like I had done a 10-mile run. But the next day I felt like I hadn't felt in years, because it just felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. And what I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years, largely thanks to my wife, but also partly through podcasting as well, is, like I say, podcasting saved my life. And it's kind of like a play on words, but it's not far off either, because as I mentioned at the very start of the show, if I keep stuff to myself and try and work it out in my head, things go very wrong very quickly. I make bad decisions and I end up in an even worse mess from a mental health point of view. I have to talk about stuff. And I believe that is the best way to start any battle with mental health, addiction, PTSD, whatever it may be. I promised you we wouldn't go over an hour, and this is the first show we've gone over an hour, which but it's just been a fascinating conversation. And look, Darren, I appreciate not only your time, but I appreciate so much you speaking so honestly about what stuff you've been through. Because I know Darren, it's not always easy. Go on, Jake.
One quick one. So, if someone's interested in the academy, how do they get hold? Like, how do they find information about the academy?
If they look on, obviously we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. It's at I2I International Academy, and then all the details will be on there. You'll be able to, we have recruiters on there, so the guys will be able to, if they message in, one of the recruiter guys will get back to you.
Brilliant.
I'll put a link in the description to that as well. Fantastic. With all, and of course, I'll also put links to Mind, to David Cottrell's foundation, various mental health charities, and also to the audio links for all the shows, and of course the YouTube channel. Subscribe, click that bell so that you get notified every time we go live.
Excellent.
Thank you to everyone who's downloaded, who's watched. Of course, thank you to my co-host Jacob. Cheers, mate, again.
Cheers, loved it. Brilliant.
And Darren, thank you to you as well. No and we'll be back next Sunday. Next Sunday, 8 p.m. for another mental health in sports show. In the meantime, we have the Andy Campbell football show every Monday with a new guest from the football world. Wednesday, we have an MMA show. Friday, we have the Andy Campbell Championship show, where we talk all things the EFL Championship. We also release podcasts on a Saturday sometimes as well. Busy. But whatever your interest, we've probably got a podcast which you'll enjoy. But until next Sunday, we will bid you adieu. Thank you for watching, and thank you to our guests. Cheers, guys.